Handhelds are awesome. The ability to take games with you wherever you go is amazing. But growing up, I always wanted to play Pokemon on the big screen. And I mean a real Pokemon game. No, I said a real Pokemon game. Perfection. As cool as these Super Game Boys and Game Boy players are, they still don't match the vision that Kid Jake dreamed about. Since then, Game Boys have evolved, and thanks to Intec Gaming, you can turn your Game Boy Advance into a dedicated home console, and there is zero soldering involved. Seriously, there isn't even an optional soldering step, and this mod kit comes with everything you need to get going and more. All you have to do is supply the Game Boy plus the time and effort. They even made it easier for me by including a full instruction manual so I don't have to do half of my job. Don't worry, I still made a full video tutorial for this, but I'm going to post that as a separate video on the second channel, Jake64. It's live right now if you want to follow along with it. I'm using this as the perfect opportunity to separate the tutorial from the review into separate videos. Sorry if that upsets you, but the link for the tutorial will be down below. So with no tutorial to weigh this video down, let's get straight to the review. The modding process was very simple. I only had a few minor issues with the instruction manual, but overall it was easy to follow. The pogo pins are the reason we are able to do this mod with zero soldering. Does it make the console a little bigger than the handheld? Yeah, but I'd way rather have it be a little thicker than have to spend all that time soldering. Plus, this opens this mod up to all of our solderless friends. That's honestly all I have to say about the console setup. However, this mod doesn't just give us a GBA home console. It also allows us to turn our old shell into a controller, which also means you'll be able to keep all the parts together in case you ever want to reverse this mod. Intec even included some aftermarket membranes in case yours are too worn out. It seems like they thought of everything, except for the L and R buttons. Yeah, L and R suck on this controller. For starters, they are really clicky. Maybe that's your thing, but I don't like it. That is more of a preference thing though. Unfortunately, L and R's problem isn't their clickiness. They're just too tall. Or at least the motherboard could have been made better, because the placement of the switches makes it so there's so little travel that it's hard to press the buttons, period. Maybe I just got a bad board, but I couldn't hardly get them to register no matter what I did to the buttons. So I ended up swapping the switches for SP, L, and R buttons, but I also had to glue in some extensions so the plastic could actually reach the new switches. I show off how I did that in more detail on the second channel's tutorial, but that's going to require soldering unless you have a better way to work around it. I tried trimming the switches themselves and that just didn't work. My janky little setup does work though, and now my GBA controller feels exactly like how a GBA would play. It's just a shame that LNR wouldn't work without some modification. On the bright side, the controller uses an SNES plug, so that means you can plug in any SNES controller and it'll just work. And on top of that, it also has Bluetooth built in, so you can pair a ton of different wireless controllers. So if your GBA controller didn't work out, you at least have a ton of wired and wireless options to choose from. Now, normally I don't talk about input delay because it's not something that I usually notice. And before you freak out, there's no input delay with wired controllers, and wireless controllers have the same amount of input delay as any other modern console. But for some reason, my LG TV would not let me turn on game mode for this console. So the TV delay was atrocious. However, game mode works on the Roku TV we have in the other room, and that TV had zero issues with delay. And same goes for the gaming monitor I used while recording the gameplay footage. Speaking of gameplay footage, the colors look so much better on here compared to the Game Boy player. Now I know some of you weirdos prefer the desaturated look because it's closer to the original screen, but I don't. What does bother me a little is that it doesn't display games in 3x2. You do get the option of 4x3 or 16x9 through HDMI, but the original aspect ratio is 3x2, so it's always going to look slightly off. I would have really appreciated a mode with integer scaling so we could have perfect pixels, but instead we have the ability to do this. Sorry for blinding you. There is also an AV out option with this little guy, so you can use a CRT without any adapters. It wasn't necessary, but it was a welcomed addition. It will be stuck at 4x3 in AV mode though, so if you have a 16x9 CRT, tough. And that's kind of the theme for this product. It's great, but the colors look great, but the scaling is off. It has HDMI and AV out, but my TV won't let me use game mode with it. You can turn your old shell into a controller, but LNR needs serious work to work. And it allows you to play your Game Boy games on the big screen, but you can no longer use it as a handheld. Another minor issue I have with it is there's no reset button. I know there isn't one on any of the Game Boy models, but if I'm using my flash cart and I want to swap games, I have to get up off the couch just to turn it off and back on again. Maybe it's a stretch, but there is a hole in the shell where the headphone jack used to be. In theory, you could put a reset switch there or on the original power switch slot, but honestly, I don't know if that's even possible to do over an SNES plug. Maybe it would have been possible if it was USB? I don't know. And again, this has an SNES port, so you can use an SNES controller. But you can't remap the buttons, so X and Y will do nothing. You'll be playing Super Mario World with A and B instead of the more comfortable Y and B. It's a minor frustration that only affects some games, but I still feel the need to bring it up. I know maybe Super Mario World wasn't the best example because you could just play it on the Super Nintendo, but you know what I mean. I do like this mod, but there are a lot of compromises that might turn some of you away, so I can't recommend it to everyone. I'd say if you aren't bothered by most of the things that I brought up and you want to play your Game Boy games on a TV, go for it. But if you already have a GameCube, you might just want to get a Game Boy player. If your GameCube is modded, you don't even need the Game Boy player disc because there is a fan-made version of the software that is better in a lot of ways. And you can also sell the 7 Cs for the original disc software. But the GameCube also won't allow you to use HDMI, Bluetooth controllers, or GBA controller without additional mods. The Super Game Boy is also an option, but won't let you do any of those extras either. Plus, it only does original Game Boy games, not even Game Boy Color. However, there is an option that might be better altogether. I haven't tried it yet, but there is an IPS mod that allows you to dock your Game Boy so it can output to HDMI. It doesn't have Bluetooth built in and it requires a lot of soldering, but it will let you keep the handheld part of your Game Boy, and it has an SNES controller port on the dock. Let me know in the comments if you want me to try this kit out for a video. Price-wise, it's hard to compare them all because the used market is so volatile, but you can get this consolizer kit from Amazon for $100. And whether or not you try this one out, I'd love to know your thoughts in those comments down below. I'd honestly be inclined to use it more if my TV allowed game mode to work with this thing, but even if it did, I wish the controller was wireless. I know that's a bit of a stretch, but my TV is kind of far away from my couch, and as long as that cord is, it's like just barely too short. But this guy will probably live on my computer desk if I ever want to stream Game Boy games or get footage for a video. Again, if you want a video tutorial for this thing to go along with the included written guide, the second channel video will be linked down below. You should subscribe to both channels if you haven't already, but that video will not only be the tutorial, but I'll also go over how I modified the L and R buttons, and I'll actually power it on and mess around with the console itself at the end. But thanks for watching this video, and as always, like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Later, guys. Tilt and tumble still works.